They told my parents I might not make it through the night. Tubes down my throat, machines breathing for me. Do you know what my mother said? Keep us updated, we have a brunch reservation. So while I lay dying in a hospital bed I paid for, they went home to the mansion I bought them and lived like royalty off my money. That's when I made a decision. If I ever walked out of that ICU, they'd regret every second they left me there. Welcome back to Revenge with James, where real betrayal meets cold justice, told the way men understand it. If you're new here, hit subscribe and settle in, because today's story proves one thing: sometimes the deadliest revenge isn't loud, it's legal. Before I ended up in that ICU bed staring at death, my life was simple, the kind of quiet a working man earns. I lived on a clean street where porch lights stayed on late and old dogs slept on front steps. Most mornings I woke up before sunrise, not because I had to, but because my bones were wired for labor. I'd make strong black coffee in the dented percolator I carried from job site to job site, step onto my back porch and watch the world wake up, fog lifting off the grass, crows arguing over breadcrumbs near the fence. I didn't drink fancy wine or drive shiny toys. My pride came from building things with my hands, pouring foundations, laying brick in rain and heat. I didn't grow up rich, but I swore my parents would, so I worked hard, no vacations, no days off, just calloused hands, quiet dinners alone, and a heart full of duty. All so they could spend their golden years laughing without ever worrying about a bill. I thought that was love. Turns out it was a down payment on betrayal. When I think about where it all started, really started, it wasn't with betrayal, it was with love, or at least, what I thought love looked like. My father, Samuel Cole, wasn't a weak man. He just believed the world owed him comfort for every hard year he'd survived. He was the kind to pat you on the back, only after pointing out what you missed. My mother, Elaine, she wore tenderness like a perfume, sweet from afar, suffocating up close. She hugged tight, but her words always had thorns. "You work too much," she'd say with a half smile. "Don't drop dead before buying us grandkids." At work I was Cole the machine, the guy who never complained, never called in sick, never settled. My crew joked I'd die with a hammer in my fist. They didn't know how close they were. My foreman, Gus, once pulled me aside, grease on his palms, worry in his voice. "You give them everything, Cole. Does anyone ask what you need?" I laughed it off. When I bought my parents that house, marble floors, tall gates, a kitchen my mother could get lost in, my dad said, "Let's hope you don't regret this someday." I thought it was pride talking, but looking back, there was something else in his eyes. Maybe I ignored it because all I wanted back then was a thank you I never truly got. Truth is, I never cared about money sitting in a bank. Didn't care about titles, or applause, or strangers calling me a success. What mattered, what kept me swinging that hammer after the sun went down, was simple: my father's approval. Every brick I laid, every wall I built, deep down, I wanted to see pride in his eyes. To hear him tell someone, just once, "That's my son, and I respect the man he's become." I thought buying him that house would be the moment, that he'd look at me the way I used to look at him when I was a boy, like he was unbreakable. But while handing them the keys, all he said was, "You did all right." It hit me harder than any fall I ever took, but I swallowed it, because loyalty in my world meant you never stop trying, even when trying starts to hurt. Everything I did after that, every contract, every sleepless night, every aching joint, I did for that one smile I never got. And that is exactly why their betrayal almost killed me. It didn't happen overnight. At first, it was just small things. My father stopped calling me son, started calling me the provider as a joke. My mother, once soft-spoken, corrected staff with a snap in her voice I didn't recognize. They asked for a second credit card, just for groceries. I said yes. I'd noticed things when I visited: new crystal vases, designer curtains, a back porch heater I didn't remember approving, little luxuries that looked more like statements. I shrugged it off. They deserve nice things, I told myself. But slowly, something shifted in the air. Instead of thanking me when I fixed something around their house, my father would say, "About time." My mother once joked to a guest at a dinner party, "We raised him like a prince, now he finally treats us like royalty." Everyone laughed. I did too. But that night, driving back to my one-bedroom apartment, I felt something I couldn't name sitting heavy on my chest, like I was furnishing a throne, and somehow forgetting where my own chair was. I told myself I was overthinking. Looking back, I was already losing more than I knew. Whenever doubt crept in, I'd remind myself of all the days they went without just to put food on my plate. I'd see flashes of my mother scraping coins together at the grocery store, my father walking miles to a factory job with holes in his boots, both of them skipping dinner so I could have seconds. I remember my father teaching me how to swing a hammer in the backyard when I was just 9, his hands guiding mine, saying, "A real man builds." Those memories were my anchor, my excuse for ignoring the unease growing inside me. So every time my parents made a cutting comment, Every time something went missing from my account, I'd drown it in another memory of their sacrifice. But memories are funny things. They can blind you so badly to who someone is becoming that you don't notice you're being gutted, slowly, silently, by the very people you swore to protect. The night everything truly shifted wasn't loud. It wasn't even ugly. I had shown up at the house unexpectedly after a long day on site, still in my dust-covered work boots, smelling of sweat and diesel. When I punched in the gate code, it flashed red. Access denied. I thought it was a glitch. When I called, my mother answered sounding surprised, almost annoyed, and said they were hosting important dinner guests, and the house wasn't presentable for me to come by. I offered to wait by the garden until they were done. She laughed a light, unfamiliar laugh and said, "Sweetheart, you wouldn't fit in right now. Maybe come back when you're cleaned up." Then she hung up. I stood there in the street, the man who bought every brick in that mansion, listening to the sound of music and laughter spilling over the tall walls, while I held a sack of takeout I thought they'd enjoy. I didn't shout. I didn't bang on the gate. I just got back in my truck and drove off into the dark, with that hot food cooling across my lap. That was the first time I realized I wasn't their son anymore. I was their employee. I didn't drive home right away. I parked 2 streets over, turned off the headlights, and just sat there, engine humming beneath me like a heartbeat. I couldn't calm. I stared at that mansion through my windshield, watched silhouettes laughing in golden light. I paid for, and I whispered out loud to nobody, "How the hell did we get here?" My fingers were still stained with grease from work. My back ached like it always did. But inside, somewhere I couldn't point to, something started tearing. I wasn't angry yet, just confused, tired in a way that sleep can't fix. I thought about the little boy in hand-me-down shoes, promising he'd make his parents proud someday. And I wondered, when did making you proud turn into making you comfortable while you forget who I am? The street was quiet. No wind, no reason to stay parked. Except I wasn't ready to face what I felt. Eventually I put the truck in gear, drove back to my apartment, and told myself, like a fool, that things would look better in the morning. I wish I could say that moment at the gate was the first time I'd tasted disappointment, but truth is, I'd been swallowing it for years in silence. When my father slipped up years back and racked up $70,000 in gambling debt, I paid it off without telling a soul, just so his reputation stayed clean at church. When my mother borrowed money from my business account to help her sister, I patched the hole and never spoke of it again, even when it nearly cost me payroll. I covered their mistakes like a dutiful son, because loyalty to me meant protecting someone even when they're wrong. They didn't call it debt. They called it family duty. So I buried my pride, again and again. And if I'm honest, maybe I believed every sacrifice would eventually be repaid with love. I didn't know then. Some debts don't get paid back in dollars. They get paid back in betrayal. I finally reached my breaking point on a Tuesday, the kind of day nobody remembers until it ruins your life. I had worked a 16-hour shift pouring concrete on a highway bridge and decided to surprise my parents with dinner the next morning. My body was running on fumes. My hands were trembling from exhaustion. When I opened my banking app to make sure I had enough to cover their favorite steakhouse, I froze. My personal savings account was bled dry. I checked the statements and saw charges I didn't recognize. Designer suits, spa weekends, 5-star hotels in my father's name. At first I thought my card had been stolen. Then I saw it, a photo on social media of my parents smiling at a luxury resort, captioned, "Living like the royalty we deserve." My mother was wearing a diamond necklace I didn't buy her. My father had a gold watch I'd never seen. That's when it hit me. I hadn't just funded their lifestyle. I'd financed my own erasure. Something inside me went dark and quiet. I felt my heart skip then crash. The next thing I remember, I was on the hospital floor, tube in my throat, ICU lights blinding my eyes, and I whispered to myself with what strength I had left, "If I live, I won't live like this again." When I woke again in that ICU bed, wired to machines and dripping with medications, the doctors told me I was lucky to be alive. I didn't feel lucky. I felt clear. I didn't call my parents. I didn't ask them to visit. Instead, I stared at the ceiling tiles and made a decision most men never admit to making. I was done begging for respect. I'd take it back in silence. I asked the nurse for my phone. My hands were still shaking when I opened my contacts. I called my lawyer, the one who helped me start my company years ago. Then I called my banker. Then I called my old friend Calvin, a retired Marine with no patience for cowardice and every patience for justice. I didn't tell them everything, just enough. For 3 nights I barely slept. I read every transaction, every deed, every document with cold, focused calm. I let the nurses think the sweat on my forehead was from fever. It wasn't. It was restraint. Because while my body healed, my revenge was growing teeth. Once I was well enough to sit up, I stopped asking the nurses for painkillers. I wanted my mind sharp. That's when the quiet work began. I had the deed to the mansion quietly transferred into a private trust with only my name on it. I froze the secondary cards. I rerouted every bill back to my business office. I told the banks I suspected fraud and needed to monitor all future withdrawals personally. My lawyer filed 3 motions under the radar. My Marine buddy Calvin installed 2 hidden cameras just inside the front door, recording every bottle popped, every smug laugh. My parents never noticed a thing. They kept living like monarchs, bragging about their kingdom, throwing lavish dinners, smiling for photos in silk robes purchased with the debt they called family love. All the while, I watched from a hospital bed, healing bones, building fury and ticking every silent box I needed. Step by step, signature by signature, I made sure that everything they called theirs would legally return to mine without a whisper of warning. There were nights, alone in that hospital room, where the rage quieted just long enough for doubt to crawl in. I'd stare out that window at the city lights and think, maybe I should have walked away. Maybe I should have let them keep the house, the money, the life I built for them. Because somewhere beneath all the anger was still that little boy, the one who just wanted his parents to look at him with honest pride. Some part of me whispered, if I burn them to the ground, what kind of man does that make me? But then I'd remember the sound of that gate, denying me entry. The taste of hospital blood in my mouth while they drank champagne by my pool. The nurse telling me my bills were unpaid while they posted pictures calling themselves royalty. That's when the doubt died. And what rose in its place wasn't anger. It was clarity. They had already taken everything soft in me. The only thing left was the part they'd forgotten still had teeth. The moment I knew there was no turning back came from their own arrogance. Calvin sent me a late-night clip from the hidden hallway camera. My parents were throwing another party, catered champagne tower, people I'd never met laughing in my foyer. My mother raised a glass and said loudly, "To our new life, one we don't have to thank anybody for." Everyone cheered. Then my father, red-faced from expensive whiskey I bought, added with a smirk, "Poor boy should have worked harder if he wanted to keep up." They clinked their glasses, celebrating my downfall, in my own home. That was the last crack they ever got to enjoy. Because in that moment, drunk on their own greed, toasting behind walls I built, they didn't realize the kingdom they were bragging about was about to be taken brick by brick before sunrise. At exactly 6:32 a.m., while the sky was still bruised with sleep, 3 vehicles rolled up to the mansion's gate: the sheriff's cruiser, the moving truck, and my lawyer's black sedan. I didn't hide. I stood by the garden wall in my hospital wristband, arms folded, watching. The gate code, recently restored to my control, swung open without resistance. The sheriff walked in with quiet authority, holding a thick file of court orders. My parents, still in silk robes from the night before, opened the door half asleep. Their smiles froze when they saw the legal papers. "Ma'am, sir, this property no longer belongs to you. Your access to all associated bank accounts and cards is officially revoked." My mother stammered. My father tried bluster. Neither stopped the officers gently escorting them to the curb, while movers began boxing their designer plates and champagne flutes, tagging each item with my name. I didn't raise my voice, didn't curse, didn't crack a smile. I stepped forward only once, just enough for them to see the calm in my eyes, and whispered, "You left me alone in the bed I paid for, so today you walk away from the throne you never earned." They shouted. I didn't respond, because revenge, when done right, doesn't roar. It falls like thunder on people who never heard the rumble. They didn't cry at first. My father's jaw clenched so tight a vein pulsed in his temple. My mother grabbed his arm like maybe if she didn't let go, the house behind them wouldn't disappear. But when the sheriff handed them a single suitcase, told them that anything else beyond that curb would be considered trespassing, the truth finally hit. My mother's face drained white, not from fear, but from realization. She wasn't a queen anymore, and my father, the man who once told me men shouldn't show feelings, stared up at those mansion windows like a child watching someone else open his Christmas presents. They didn't scream, didn't beg. They just stood there. 2 people who thought they'd won, suddenly understanding the game had been over long before they took their victory lap. That silence, that look in their eyes, was louder than any apology they could have whispered, and it told me everything I needed to know. Justice had finally come home. People think revenge makes you feel powerful, like you regain what was stolen. They're half right. I did reclaim my house, my money, my dignity, but I didn't walk away untouched. That man who laughed easily, the one who believed loyalty meant you bleed for people even when they stop loving you back, he's gone. What remained was quieter, sharper around the edges. Someone who understands that being a good man doesn't mean being a used man. I don't smile as often. I don't explain my decisions. And I damn sure don't hand out second chances to people who stepped over me while I bled. Some might call it becoming cold. I call it becoming awake. There's one thing I never threw out. The original silver house key I handed my parents the day I surprised them with the mansion. Back then I placed it in my father's palm, trembling with pride, and whispered, "You'll never worry again." He'd slipped that key on his keyring like it meant the world. After the eviction, the sheriff found the same key tossed on a marble countertop they never paid for, abandoned like a trinket that had outlived its usefulness. I picked it up. turned it over in my fingers, and realized something I should have known years ago. A key is only a gift when the person holding it remembers who built the door. I keep it now, hanging on a leather cord in my workshop, not as a memory of what I lost, but as a reminder of the day I finally locked out everyone who thought my love made me weak. Some men wear medals. I wear a key. For a while the house stayed silent. No more laughter that didn't belong to me. No more footsteps that treated my hallway like a throne room. I rebuilt everything, my strength, my peace, my boundaries. Until one morning, 6 months later, I checked my mailbox and found a letter addressed in my mother's handwriting. No return address. Just 3 words on the back, written in red ink where only I would notice. We're not finished. I haven't opened it yet. Truth is, I'm not sure if it's an apology or a threat, but whatever it is, I'll be ready. Because once a man wakes up from betrayal, he never sleeps with his guard down again. I still think about it sometimes, late at night when the world goes quiet, and even victory feels heavy. I didn't scream. I didn't fight dirty. I simply protected what was mine, the way I thought a man was supposed to. But every now and then I hear my father's old words echo in my head. Family comes first, even when they fail you. And I wonder, did I cross a line I can't uncross? Tell me, honestly, was I wrong to take back what they stole, or was I finally right for choosing myself? Because this kind of justice, it doesn't ask for forgiveness. It asks one question only. If you were me, would you have shown mercy or done worse?